Toolbox 2 is the kind of subtitle of it is the choreography of everyday life. And its function is really to give someone an impossible task with massive technical demands to see whether they can act and do that. So it's a major challenge, and they will never be given anything more difficult to do after they leave. So what they have to do is they have to do real activity, like making a salad or a cup of tea or grinding coffee, with real things, not mimed props, to 90 seconds of either Bartók String Quartet No. 4 or George Walker, African-American composer, also a very complicated writer of chamber music, to about 90 seconds to 2 minutes of that. And they do that with headphones in their ears, so that we then look at their acting. Do we believe it, what's happening? And then over the semester, they develop that into a tiny piece. And we also look at it with the headphones out. So it's a kind of, it's something where you work intensely on a tiny amount of something, and it has good results. Project. In 2008, I was made chair of the program, which I did until the wonderful Carl Cofield took over, which is great. And when I took over, I really didn't want to do any directing. All I wanted to do was to see what was going on. But the production manager came to me in a panic and said, listen, someone has just dropped out of a second-year project that's going to be taught in one of our 2 small spaces. You'll have to direct it. I said, I don't want to. Then she said, okay, you could work with Jim Calder. Now, Jim Calder, as you may or may not know, is a kind of genius, clown, director of movement, an eccentric, but magnificent. So I couldn't pass up that opportunity. One of the problems with these 2 spaces was that they weren't soundproof, a bit like this noise that's going on now, which meant that you could only do one play, then another play, or one event, then another event, because the sound would bleed into the other space. But I decided I wanted to make a virtue of that necessity. So I thought what we would do is we would do something about the obscure work of Strindberg, because I knew Strindberg's occult diaries, and we would play them with a company who would basically do a piece that spanned both places, but we would then have an audience of 40 in one space, an audience of 40 in the other. They would watch their bit, and then there'd be a 15-20 minute break, and then they would then swap over, and they would then make up whatever the thing was that they had witnessed. And that, bizarrely, it was like an avant-garde version of a British playwright called Alan Ayckbourn. As an actor, partly as an actor at grad acting, I would maintain that one of the great things about the actors at grad acting is that they are game. That they will leap in and they will do it. They will believe in something even without having all the I's dotted and the T's crossed. And that is a very useful characteristic to have as an actor. So therefore, for the second years who've done things which have been within the canon, if you like, they've done things as they've approached the second year with language, etc., etc. And suddenly they're thrown into something which they cannot predict. They don't know what the outcome is going to be, and so therefore that desire for end product cannot quite operate. They just have to be as good as they can be. It so happens that the end product is intriguing and interesting and challenging, but it's not a sine qua non. With Shakespeare, I take Shakespeare right from the get-go in what I would call 1-1. And I'm a relatively experienced Shakespeare director. I've done Shakespeare in Central Park and stuff and all that, a few of them. So my approach is actually quite strict in the sense that, just as with Bartók, where they're never going to do something that difficult, with the Shakespeare, I want the cohort to get to grips with what the rules might be if someone were very, very strict. Rules which they can then abandon. But for the purpose of this class, they learn all about scansion iambic pentameters and what we now call open endings. Antithesis, all those things which one might be frightened of. The idea is to introduce one to them, introduce one to a whole set of imperatives. But what I say is, look, good scansion won't save a bad actor. If you're a good actor, you'll be able to do it, but it gives you something, as it were, to kick against and also to work with. And so that's what we do in our first semester. Then how they relate to it, how they use it, then becomes up to them as we move through the program. I'm a big believer in craft. So acting is a skill, not simply something to do with accessing your emotions. It is to do with that as well. But some of the skills are skills that you can improve in. So that, for instance, if you're a painter, you know, people go and study busts. They used to study busts in the Louvre or wherever they were going. So one of the characteristics of being an actor, for me, is observation. And so what you and I have devised is something which improves the qualities of your observation. And that is to do a variation on what I think used to be called hot seating, where what you do, though, in this case, is we take a category like someone who works with their hands, and then the students are sent out into New York City, sometimes with friends or whatever, for protection, to find someone who fits that category and talks to them for maybe an hour and a half, then goes away, takes notes, doesn't record it, and then they come back as that person. And the concept behind it is that when you become an actor, often you become an actor because you're influenced by another actor. It may be Denzel Washington or whoever it may be, Scarlett Johansson, let's say, and you want to be like them. Big mistake. You want to be like yourself. And the idea of being like yourself is that you want to fight against the received performance. That's the performance which is a copy of another person's performance. So this is increasing your vocabulary of performance, where you're given tasks which are sometimes beyond your capabilities as to the sorts of people that you might meet. For instance, someone with deeply held religious or political beliefs different to your own. Well, that is quite a task. And what one has found is that, interestingly, is that often the acting is better when the actor's engagement is with the subject rather than the performance. And I've always found that the grad actors they'd gone beyond self-protection when they began to approach the work. And so that idea of an actor being, as I said, game or engaged in the idea of doing something becomes a very kind of attractive characteristic when you're employing people from outside. So it's not that they are less sensitive, they aren't, but they are more adventurous. And so I think a spirit of adventure and a spirit of cooperation, we keep talking about the cohort, that sense of how you relate to your group, and a sense, I guess, of family, which feels really enduring. It existed before me, it existed through me, and existing now as well. And that sense of family, I think, is crucial, but it's not family in a kind of mollycoddling way. It's family in the sense of, come on, you can do this. You know, you can match up to that. So it has a kind of strength, has a sinew to it. One of the great things about grad acting is that the productions themselves are chosen for the actors. And we have these two wonderful third-year spaces, Theatre C and the African Grove, part of which because I happened to be the chair at the time that they were being designed, I had a big hand in what the designing was, and along with graduate design, a guy called Andrew Lieberman, Susan Hilferty, and Matthews. But they're they're better than many, many professional spaces. And so the production values are very high. And so that idea that you're going to be in a place which is going to test your voice, because we don't use microphones for amplification. So therefore you're equipped when you leave to work in any space, and you know that you can reach the back of the house. Even though the spaces themselves are relatively modest, they're not enormous. Nonetheless, they're testing and exciting from a theatrical point of view. This is Jim. Yes! This is my dog, Jim, who comes with me sometimes into class. Yeah, anyway, lovely. Take care.